next speaker is one of the big fundamental strengths that I have since I know him, and so a Rav that's a very chashuv paisik, and somebody who has sent a lot of parents here and holds them, carries them with psak and with chizuk, and we work very well together. I would like to think we're a good team, and a very, very inspirational person, and it's my schus to ask Yoseph Vigler to say a few words, to be mechazik our olam and all the people that are watching that need so much chizuk.
This moment is a moment of mesiras nefesh, meaning that a person should be on a level of giving over oneself totally to Hashem. Absolute connection with God at that point. And the whole Yom Kippur is really that. Yom Kippur is a day which is 5 tefillos. And each one of those tefillos corresponds to a level of the soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And then you reach the pinnacle, and you reach Ne'ilah. And Ne'ilah means that the gates are closing. But not that the gates are closing and you're on the outside. The gates are closed and you're on the inside. And it's just you and Hashem together, nobody else present at that moment. That's Ne'ilah. And then when you get to the end of Ne'ilah, what it is to be Moiseh Nefesh, to be able to give ourselves over totally, completely, and utterly to the Eibishter. And the word Mesiras Nefesh is fascinating, because the term you would have expected to mean is not Mesiras Nefesh, but Mesiras Aguf. Mesiras Aguf is when you die al Kiddush Hashem. So you're supposed to be thinking and meditating that I'm ready to give up my entire being, my entire self to Hashem. That would be Mesiras Aguf. Mesiras Nefesh is interesting. What are we giving over? Are we giving over our souls to Hashem? And that's exactly what it is. There's Mesiras Aguf. That's not what we Jews do. That's easy. Mesiras Aguf means to die for the cause. The Jews throughout the ages were ready to die for the cause. Mesiras Nefesh is to give away the spirituality. That's a whole different ballgame. It's to be willing to give everything over to the Eibishter. Mesiras Nefesh. Sitting in this room, there's an energy. I don't think there's a better way to spend Erev Yom Kippur than in this room. The energy is Yom Kippur Dik. Because the energy is one of Mesiras Nefesh. Let's face reality. What we're looking at is that if you as a parent are in a place of wanting to be with Hashem, and Yom Kippur is Achas Bashana, Yom Kippur is Yechida Shebenefesh, Yom Kippur is this holy moment. And then in this holy moment, it's being desecrated, it's being compromised, and it's so difficult, it's so challenging. It kind of like tears and rips your whole soul apart. And you feel a bleeding heart. And it's like crying to the Eibishter, like, what exactly am I meant to be giving you over here? The guf, I'll give you my guf. But you want my nefesh? You want my soul? And you know, I've had I don't know what it is. It's not a privilege. It's I don't know what the word is. But having worked with so many parents and going along the path, what you notice is that it's a brutal path, no question of a doubt. It's a path which leads somewhere into your own soul. At the end of the Teichacha, the last pasuk in the Teichacha of Kisava is Ve'ashivcha Hashem Mitzrayim bo'oniyos b'derech asher amarti lechem lo yisosif od liroisa. And that means that Hashem will return you to Egypt in boats, in a place which I told you you'll never see again. That path is what we know as the Teichacha. It's walking a path that I told you you'll never, ever have to walk. And what we see as parents is that we're walking a path that we should never be walking on. A path of an untrodden path. And you're wondering, how did I get here? What is it? And it's real. Very difficult to give a speech with this energy in the room. It's not drasha. It's not drash. It's real life. It's painful hearts. It's souls that are crying out to the Eibishter. And the energy over here is real. I have to thank Reb Avi for really, sometimes when I get the question, I'm like, the halacha is that you go to ask a doctor for medical issues, and you go to ask a military professional for strategic army questions. It's good to have a professional in this area. Not sure what to call it, but it's really good to have a professional in this area. And just very special that Reb Avi has chosen this path, and really a shakoyach. So the question is, how do we tread this path? How do we do this journey? The Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya says, "Ve'eshivcha Hashem Mitzrayim bo'niyos b'derech asher amarti lechem l'soisef od liroisa." Ve'eshivcha is called tshuva. And Hashem will allow you to do tshuva when you go down to Mitzrayim and you go on the path which you never should have gone on. And that path, which is the path of that you shouldn't have gone on, that is the very path of teshuvah. It's interesting how, I believe it was the Noam Elimelech, I think it's told of. Someone said to him once, "How do I do tshuva? I did a verse and I want to know how you do tshuva." And he looked at the guy and he says, "I don't know. How did you do the Aveira?" Whatever manual you used to do the Aveira in the first place, that's the manual of doing the tshuva. There's no manual. It's called, I'm looking at the sign, it's called twisted parenting. It's twisted. Twisted is the path, it's a path which you're not supposed to walk on. But how do you know that the path you're walking on is God's path? How do you know it's the Eibishter's path? Those words which we say at the end of Yom Kippur are the key. The words are Hashem hu Elikim 7 times. Seems strange. Don't you know that Hashem is Elikim? Anyone here challenging that Hashem hu Elikim? You got a problem with that? Hashem hu Elikim, God is God? Yeah. What else were you thinking? It doesn't seem to be something that we're challenged by. And whilst it's very emotional to get into that state of Mesiras Nefesh at the end of Yom Kippur, it doesn't appear to be something so earth-shattering. But take a look at the source of this concept of Hashem hu Elikim. When Yaakov Avinu left the home of his father, he went to sleep on Har Moriah. And in his sleep, he woke up and he had a dream, and he had the ladder going up and down with the malachim. And then he turns to Hashem and he says, "Listen, God, I'll make you a deal. If Hashem will be with me and he'll guard me on this path, and he'll give me what I need, and if I return home to my father's home, then v'hoyo Hashem li le'elikim. And if not, what are the alternatives? If I go to Beis Lavan and I don't get the food I need and I don't get anything, then I'm out. Hashem is not God. That's fair weathered. Really? What's the deal he's cutting with the Eibishter? What does it mean if Hashem goes with me and I succeed? Then fine. And if not, then not. See those words, V'hoyo Hashem li le'elikim. The words Hashem hu Elikim do not mean Hashem is God. Because there's 2 different names of Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei and Elokim. It doesn't mean I believe in God. Of course you believe in God. Who doesn't believe in God? It means let's understand what Yud Kei Vav Kei is, and let's understand what the avodah is and what's happening, and then we can look at ourselves in a new light. Time and again on Yom Kippur, we clap. And we say, Al Chait, Al Chait, Al Chait. And all the way at the end of the Al Chait, you say, Al Chatoim, Shoni Chayav Maleim, Arba Mises Beis Din, Skila, Streifa, Hereg, Vechenek. What are you thinking about when you say that? If I'm liable to be put to death, capital punishment, for stoning, burning, guillotine, sword, and strangling. And we tend to think of this as, well, so Hashem, if I transgressed any one of those big ones, then, well, I'm clapping al chait now, and thank God that we don't have capital punishment today, because it wouldn't work too well for Avodah Zarah, for Chil Shabbos, etc. Baruch Hashem, we don't have those problems today. What relevance is it to us today? So we tend to think of our relationship with Yom Kippur as somewhere like this. There's a God up there, and He wants us to do stuff, and when we don't do it, well then, we get punished. So we say sorry, and then Hashem forgives us, and then we don't get punished. And it's almost like an external relationship with Hashem. It's chitzoniistic. Because you're not really doing the avodah, there's no actual change taking place. It's Hashem's going to do this from above, and Hashem, please give me a good year. So you're davening to Hashem, you're asking Hashem to give me a good year. But really, the avodah of Yom Kippur is to internalize our relationship with the Almighty, to build a connection to the Eibishter. So the shaila is, how do you build that deep, intrinsic oneness and connection with Hashem? Well, there's 4 capital punishments. And even though we don't get the actual capital punishment today, we do get the actual punishments over there. The Alter Rebbe explains it as follows. He says, what's skila? Skila means that you get thrown off the building, and then a stone gets thrown on the person, and the stone is thrown on the person's heart. That happens to us today. What do you get skila for? For bowing down to idols. Idolatry, avodah zarah, gives you skila. So what does it mean? How do you bow down to idols? Most of us haven't had the experience of bowing down to idols. We have no idea what that means, to bow your head to an idol. Why would you even do that? But figuratively, we know exactly what it means. Because bowing down to your head means submitting your brain. So your brain is looking up, and you cause your brain to look down. And what do you do it for? External forces in the world. See, when you begin to panic in life, and when you feel anxieties from things, some stuff going on around you, see what you're doing? You're submitting your head. I'm petrified. I'm scared. That's a godless experience. You've taken Hashem out of that picture. You don't feel Him in that moment. Because if you feel God, what does it say? When you are angry, add to the family of angry stress, panic, anxiety, worry, the whole family of everything that entails. And so what you're doing is disconnecting. And what's the consequence? It's not a punishment. What's the consequence of idolatry? The consequence is a heart that feels nothing, a heart that feels stone. That's called getting skila. So when you get to Yom Kippur, it's not about me saying sorry to Hashem if I did something called avodah zarah. It's on the contrary. It's me noticing the avodah zarah that I'm involved in now. I'm submitting my head. I bowed myself down to the external forces that are out there. And the result of that is lack of feeling. So what happens is, when you start worrying, it's like daigas aparnasa, when you start worrying about things, you bowed your head down to the external forces out there. And your heart becomes stone. You start getting anxious and worried. And what you want to do is bring Hashem right back down into your life. How do you bring Hashem back down? The Arizal says that every night when you go to sleep, you should say this: Hashem, if I chayev skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek, each one of those 4 corresponds to the name of Hashem, Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei. And what's the Yud? The Yud is if I don't feel a connection to God, if I lack that connection to Hashem. So every time in your life you feel a worry, you're like, what's going to be, Hashem? What's going to be? Was wird sein? You say, I don't know, I'm very worried. I'm very worried. Let yourself feel the worry, feel it, and then allow Hashem to take over. It's called letting go. Eibishter, I know you're with me. You got me. I've got that relationship with you. What's Sreifa? The Alter Rebbe says Sreifa is when you're burnt alive. The auto da fe was easy. That's not what Sreifa means to us today. Sreifa is when there's a fire raging inside your heart and you have no way to control it. Ever had that experience? Ever seen a child with that experience? I think we call it today addiction. It's when you have no way out and your heart feels on fire. You're being burnt alive inside and you don't know how to run away because you're already suffering the consequence. And the result is a detachment. Skilos Sreifa Hereg V'chena corresponds to Yud K Vav K. And what we want to do each and every time is to be mindful, to notice the feelings that we have, the emotions that we have in our life, and every time you have that feeling, it's to let Hashem in. That's called the power of tshuva. Tshuva means not denying the feeling that I have, but allowing ourselves to feel that feeling. It is quite incredible that what's really happening in our times is we're not going down, we're actually going up. When your child is off the derech, he's perhaps questioning the derech. You're telling him, come on, man darf doch fasten Yom Kippur, c'est Yom Kippur, was ist mit dir? And the kid looks back at you like, why? So that Hashem should give you a good year? You really believe that stuff? You believe that if you fast Yom Kippur, you get a good year, and if you don't get a good year? Give me some truth. Let me see how you discovered the Eibishter in your life, and that's the Avodah. The Avodah is for each and every one of us to look and saying, okay, I'm being chayav skila. And nowadays, we don't get the actual skila. You do teshuvah, and when you do teshuvah, you return to Hashem. So every time you monitor your feelings, you look and you say, I feel panic. Okay, I'm feeling panic. Hashem, I know that you're with me in this space. And you know we say every day in davening, Chisanim yor divor. Chisanim yor divor. You gave me life from falling into a pit. But on a deeper level, you know where you get life from? Chisani, mi yor divor. Because you fell into the pit, you can push against something and rise. If you want to get up off the chair, you push against the chair and then you pick yourself up. When you have a negative feeling, that's the opportunity to push yourself up. The Avodah of Tshuva requires us to introduce Hashem into our lives, to allow Yud K Vav K into our lives, to allow God to be part of our lives. And it's like, Hashem, I feel stuck. I'm being burnt alive. I feel the Sreifa. Okay, I'm feeling it. I get it. It's tough. It's harsh. Eibishter, I know that you're with me. I feel your presence in this moment. What does Yaakov mean? He says, Imi yeh Elokim imodi. If Hashem is with me, Ushmorani b'derech hazeh, and He protects me on this path, then v'hoyo Hashem li le'elikim. What he means is this. There's two names of Hashem. Elikim and Yud Kei Vav Kei. If you don't go through the path of life, you never get to know the Rebbeinu Shalom. You never get to know God. You're just talking and it's external. It's all external. But if good old Yaakov, tzaddik that he is, holy man, Yaakov Ish Tom, if I go to Beis Lavan and I enter that mirma, Ochiv Ani Beramos, I'll be his brother in Ramos, I'll be wily, I'll figure things out, I'll get across. Then what's going to happen? V'hoyo Yud Kei Vav Kei li le'elikim. Elikim is when God is hiding. And when Hashem is hiding, you sometimes feel stuck, worried, raw pain. It's when you're being burnt alive. And every time you're being burnt alive, what do? You turn to Hashem and you say what Yaakov said. He's not saying, I believe in God. Of course I believe in God. He's saying, if I do this, then v'hoyo Yud Kei Vav Kei li le'elikim. Then I'll feel the divine power in my life. I'll feel how Hashem is my God. That's hard work. It's difficult. That's why in davening on Yom Kippur, time and again, we say, Vayikra, Hashem, Hashem. You call up to Hashem twice. Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum B'Chanun. What's Hashem, Hashem? To go deeper, to experience a deep relationship, an intrinsic relationship with the divine, with Hashem. That's not easy. Who actually said those words, the real words, Hashem wa Elikim? Where do they come from? Eliyahu, right? So Eliyahu took a duel. He had 400 prophets of the Baal on one side, and he was on his own on the other side. And what does he do? He challenges them. And at the end of it, he tells them, okay, you guys try daven to your Baal and see if it works. And it doesn't work. And they try, they call to their Baal, and nothing happens. And then Eliyahu comes over. What does he do? Vayirape es mizbach Hashem heharus. Note how Eliyahu did something which was forbidden. He did it b'hiras shah. It was only for that moment. What did he do? He offered a mizbeach, a bama, in a place where you were not supposed to offer it. It's not in Yerushalayim. It's not in the Beis HaMikdash. But he had a divine message that you needed to do something which was apparently what looked like it was the wrong thing to do. What does he do? He builds a mizbeach and he davens to Hashem. And a fire comes down and eats up and consumes everything. And the fire eats up the power of the bull. And the people suddenly see. And they notice that what we thought was God, we were bowing down to some idols. We were submitting ourselves to the external forces out there. We didn't realize Hashem in our lives. We thought we were from a Yidden. We just thought we had a Baal in our lives and we were still from. We didn't notice. We were Poiseach al Shteas Te'ipim. We didn't really get it. And what do we daven? Mishe'ono le'Eliyahu b'Har HaKarmel hu ya'aneinu. We want to download that same power of Eliyahu into our lives. And what does that mean? To feel Hashem hu ha'elikim. So the people cry out and they say, Hashem hu ha'elikim. But they didn't say it once, they said it twice. Because the first time Hashem told us that he was our God was at Matan Torah. Hashem came along and he says, Anoichi Hashem Elikecha, I am Hashem your God. I am Hashem your God. Got the message? It's easy. That's how we Yidden have been living for so many generations. Hashem Elikecha, Anoichi Hashem Elikecha. It's beautiful. But it didn't work for the generation of Eliyahu. It just didn't work. They submitted themselves to an external force. But when they did teshuvah, they got to a power that they never knew existed before. And that's the power of Hashem hu Elikim twice. See, Matan Torah took place on Shavuos. And what happened as a result of Matan Torah 40 days later? They messed up. They botched up the Egel Azav. And then Moshe Rabbeinu went up for another 40 days and he asked for forgiveness and he got the Salachti Kidvarecha. And then he went up a third time. And he came down 40 days later and he got the second Luchos. On Yom Kippur, we celebrate the second Luchos. What's the celebration of Yom Kippur? It's Matan Torah, the real Matan Torah. The first Matan Torah we said, Anoichi Hashem Elikecha. And then what happened? Yeah, it didn't go right. So we lost the relationship with Hashem Elikecha. The second Matan Torah was Eliyahu Bar HaKarmel. That's Yom Kippur. That's when the people said, Hashem hu Elikim. Hashem hu Elikim. They said it twice. Because one time is a tzaddik, the second time is a Baal Tshuva. It's easy to say Hashem hu Elikim. But after you've experienced Skilas, Sreif, Hereg, and Chenek, after you've gone through Gehenim, Alei Adomis, you were over Be'emek HaBacha, walking in the valley of tears. And now it's like getting out of the space. If you never walked through the bor, you never walked through the pit, you never get a chisani mi yardivor. The best way to attach ourselves to Hashem is to push against the hard surface, a resistance. And when you have resistance in your life, that's the opportunity that Hashem is affording us to get out of it and to get better and to get connected to Hashem in a way we could never dream of possible. Sometimes you got to build a bama of Eliyahu and you got to get a hiras shah, you got to get a psak from a rav, that it's permissible, that it's halachically the right thing to do. And if you do, you push against it. And what you get a result is the second luchos, which is the double, Hashem hu Elikim, Hashem hu Elikim. Isn't it fascinating You know the story, like everybody knows the story. When Matan Torah, there were the mountains, right? It says the mountains came to, they wanted the Torah to be given on me. The kids sing the song. The Torah should be given on me. And Hashem said, no, I can't give the Torah on you, Har Tavar. Why? Because you're too tall. It's the Baal Gaiva. I can't give the Torah on you, Har Carmel, because you're arrogant. But who am I going to give the Torah on? Little tiny Har Sinai. Holy, amazing mountain that he is. Did anybody tell you the rest of the story? That after the Eibishter gave the Torah on Mount Sinai, what happened? Egel Azav, and it was messed up. Didn't really work. Did anybody tell you what happened on the other two mountains? Pasuk says, Lama Terat Dun Horim Gavnunim. Which were those mountains? You know which ones they were? The ones, the tall ones, the arrogant ones that wanted the Torah to be given on them. They were called Har Tavor and Har Carmel. You know what happened on Har Carmel? Eliyahu. That arrogant mountain, he too found God. When the people came on Har Carmel and they said, Hashemu Elikim, Hashemu Elikim. And in Har Tavor, there was also an event that happened. Dvoira led the people. In the beginning of Shoftim, she led the people in Har Tavor. What happened? The people sinned. They messed up. And then Dvoira led them, and she led them to a beautiful song. They sang a song which came from the heart, came from the soul. And in that song, Dvoira says, Onoichi la Hashem, Onoichi Ashira. So the Balatanya explains Onoichi twice, right? Onoichi Hashem Elekecha by Matan Torah was the power of a tzaddik. But the power of Baal Tshuva is double as great. Onoichi la Hashem, Onoichi Ashira. Those mountains which couldn't have the Torah given on them suddenly got the power of Teshuvah. That's the path we're looking to tread on. It's a power of Teshuvah. So how do you get there? Let me share with you a little story. Back in the day, the different Saras were in those days. Tsar Nikolai made a decree. And it was called the Cantonist Decree. So there was forced army service for 25 years. And there weren't enough 18-year-olds in the army, so no problem. We'll take 7, 8, 9-year-olds. And he took little kids. And they were snatched away. It had to be Jewish. And every Jewish community had to give a quota. And if you didn't give the quota, then they were snatched. Who wanted to give an 8-year-old child? I believe it was somewhere around 80,000 children that were snatched in a historic period of 20 years in those 1800s. And it was an absolute calamity. Imagine parents who are raising their kids and suddenly the kid is Tinek Shenishba, literally, gets captured. Those Cantonists, most of them didn't survive. They either died from all the torture they endured, or they suffered terribly and they were baptized. But a lot of them, a nice amount, survived, and they got out of it. And the Cantonists, when they got out, they were actually pretty in a good position, because they were the Tsar's soldiers. So Jews weren't allowed to live anywhere. Jews had Pale of Settlement, certain areas where you could live, and you couldn't live in the rest of the places. But there were places you could live. And the Cantonists were everywhere. A group of Rabbanim once came to intercede with Tsar Nikolai on another decree. And they came into Peterburg. No Jews were allowed in Peterburg, but there was one shul in Peterburg, the Cantonist shul. Only Cantonists had a shul there, so only Cantonists daven over there. So the Cantonists are in the shul, and it's beautiful. And the Rabbanim come to daven in the Cantonist shul. Cantonists can't really read Hebrew properly. The Ivra is not the greatest. So the Rabbanim asked if we could lead the services. Cantonists said, sure, go ahead. And they led the services. That was good for Ma'ariv, for Shachris, for Musaf, and even for Mincha. By Ne'ilah, the Cantonists walk over to the Rabbanim and they say, Adkan. Ne'ilah is that tefillah of the Achas Bashana. Within the greatest level is the Mesiras Nefesh is Yechida. They said, only Cantonists know how to daven this tefillah. And sorry, we can't have one of you. Okay? So the Rabbanim allowed the Cantonists to go up. Who's going to lead the services? One of the Cantonists gets up. He says, I'm going to lead. And he opens up his shirt. He tears open his shirt. And they see all over wounds. It was raw wounds. Everything was still raw. You could see all the lashes and pains and suffering all over his body. And this Cantonist goes up to the Amud. And he's about to lead the services. He's about to start. He's Gadol Vizkadash. How do you start? Turns to the Rebbeinu Shalom and he says, Rebbeinu Shalom Eibishter, he says, we Cantonists coming to daven, what should we daven for? We should daven for health? I'd rather be dead, actually. What should we daven for? For children? None of us is expecting to ever get married. We're done. We're toast. We should daven for parnasa, for livelihood. B'daf nishkim parnasa. We don't need that. Everything the Zohar gives us, we don't need anything. So we're sitting here and we want to lead the services, that we want to daven, I want to pray. What should I pray for? You know what I pray for? Yisgadal v'yisgadal shmei rabo. All I'm davening for is that the great, mighty name of Hashem should be exalted and sanctified. In the world that he created the way he wanted to create it. And he should bring redemption to this world. The Rabbanim was sitting by and they heard the tefillah of the Cantonist. They learned how to daven. That's how you daven. There's only one thing we need in our lives, and that is to be able to experience that our relationship is only with Hashem. Isgadal v'Iskadash me'rabba. That's the tefillah. And within that tefillah, everything else comes about. You get exactly what you want as long as you reach Isgadal v'Iskadash shmei rabba. What does that mean? If I'm here to have a good child and to be mechanech and educate a wonderful child and be able to see her under the chuppah and be able to get that nachas from him, that's all me and my ideas. But what does the Eibishter want? The Eibishter wants me to channel his power to my child. That's all Hashem wants. It's a path that no man has ever trodden before. But that's the path of tshuva. That's the path of Shivcho Hashem Mitzrayim. And when we get to that path, we access divine power. The divine power of Anoichi Hashem Lekecha was powerful. But now we're going to reach what we say in the Ilah, Anoichi, Anoichi, Humoichi Fshoecha Lemani. We're going to double the power of Anoichi, like they did in Har Carmel. Those mountains which were told, no, the Torah cannot be given on you, you're arrogant. Those children who were told, no, sorry, not you. We're going to show those kids that Torah can be given on you too. And what it takes is me to be able to channel sometimes, as long as I get a hirav, to be able to do so, to build a bama, which I'm not supposed to sometimes, to go on a path I never expected to. But when I do, I'm going to cause those children and myself to realize, if I go on this path, ushmorani baderech hazeh, that's the tefillah, Hashem should protect us. And v'shavti v'sholem u'beis avi, because I'm an ish tom be'etzem, I'm a simple person, and I have to go on this path. If I go on this path, what's going to happen? V'hoyo yudkei vovkei li le'elikim, I'll overcome all that skilas reif v'hereg v'chenek, I'll get to a place which no man has ever got to before. That's the power of tshuva. And yes, it's difficult. It's so tough. And it's easy to talk. It's so simple to talk. But when the heart is bleeding and you have to actually go do this, it's the hardest work in the world. But at least we know that the goal is to mesiras hanefesh, to give the soul over to Hashem. To be able to return the soul to Hashem. That's the power of tshuva. We want to get that power on this Yom Kippur. And so my brachas to everyone is just to be able to experience a return to God. A return which will be able to return the world around us. Ve'ashivcha Hashem Mitzrayim, to be able to bring us all back to tshuva. And to be able to say Hashem Elokim, and experience Geula.